For the last 30 days, the eyes of the world have been on Ukraine and the conflict occurring there, and in particularly on the Ukrainian president, Vladimir Zelenskyy. Here to discuss some of the communication lessons that we've learned in that time frame is Billy Warden, once again from GBW Strategies. Billy, thank you so much for being here. We're excited for the conversation.
Thank you, Brad. Love being involved with IOPL.
So let's start a little bit about talking about the positioning of who Vladimir Zelenskyy was in the eyes of his country, and how that's evolved over the last 30 days.
It's really an extraordinary story, and I'm no expert on Ukrainian politics, but backstory is that Zelenskyy was a comedian, then actor, more serious actor, then producer, who decided to get into politics and became the country's president and found politics much more treacherous and complicated than perhaps he expected. He was flailing a little bit before Russia invaded. That has changed quite a bit as he has been able to pivot and become the central character in communicating what's going on in Ukraine.
And in the article that you wrote for WRIL TechWire, you mentioned that his approval rating was about 31% prior to some of this lead up to this conflict. So how has he waged an information war that has rivaled the war that is going on the ground? And what has he done to establish himself from a 31% approval politician to someone that is being praised as our generation's Churchill?
Yeah, you said information war, and that is a great term. Isn't it interesting how Russia is waging the physical offensive? They are on the offense when it comes to tanks and troops. They're the ones invading, but they are on the defense in terms of the information war because of Zelenskyy's skill. And I mentioned three things in the column to think about, but the main one is the need for a hero, a protagonist in a story. Every story needs a protagonist to actually be a story, to actually unfold as a narrative rather than just a lot of competing information points coming at us. So think of Tom Hanks in Saving Private Ryan. Through his eyes and his reaction and his actions, he becomes the way we make sense of that slice of this giant event, World War II. And that's what Zelenskyy has done. He has become the hero in the story that allows us to experience the pain and trauma of the event and process what can happen to, if not make things right, then pursue and seek justice and relief for those who are under the tank wheels. He becomes the hero. And there's always a hero in a story. In politics, often the hero will be a constituent or a selfless public servant who the politician is pointing out. In product marketing, the hero of the story is usually the user of the product. Usually in communications, you don't want to make yourself the hero because it ends up looking self-aggrandizing, or like you're complaining, like the head of BP seemed to be doing when he complained about having to put his life on hold to deal with the Deepwater Horizon explosion. Of course, this is a different situation. Zelenskyy isn't being self-aggrandizing by putting himself in the hero role. He's playing a public service by allowing us to understand a complicated situation much more simply.
So you've talked about the man, but let's talk a little bit about the medium aspect of it as well. Churchill was obviously known for radio, and that was the medium, the most prevalent medium at that time. What in modern times has Zelenskyy done so well to break through that normal information, that chaos that we lived through in our daily life, and to really take hold of people's minds and hearts?
Yeah, well, you mentioned Churchill and radio. Of course, Churchill had so much less platforms at his disposal. Zelenskyy has all sorts of platforms, and he's done a remarkable job of trying to meet people on those platforms. So, for example, the Twitter videos of him in the streets of Ukrainian cities, expressing resilience, expressing the Ukrainian people's will to fight back and never surrender. They were very simple and very powerful. They put us in the situation, which of course is always very visceral, to be there, right in the heart of it. And then when he went to see the U.S. Congress, or went to see them via Zoom, he used a more polished video, a more produced video with music and B-roll and lots of technical things going on in the video to make it a little bit fancier, but it was still very powerful. So he's using every tool at his disposal.
And since we have talked about Churchill a little bit, you've posted another article this week about Winston Churchill using some of those, possibly thinking through him using some of those mediums and how social media might have fit his communication style. Tell us a little bit about the impetus of that article and kind of what you explored.
Yeah. Well, I heard a pundit on, I always listen to POTUS on Sirius XM, and they have the most jaded pundits on there. And, he said Zelenskyy was emerging as our greatest leader since Churchill. That's quite a change for somebody who was at, 31% in the polls not too long ago. My editor at TechWire, like a lot of editors, has a thing for Churchill because, press editors have to persevere and be dogged through all kinds of complications and challenges. So they tend to gravitate toward the Churchill persona. So he said, let's talk about Churchill, and ask that we figure out together how Churchill would have used social media. And to your point about Churchill, I think he would have been great at most of it, just terrific at it. And let's think first of all about how focused he was. It's so easy on Twitter to become a troll and go down all kinds of rabbit holes, get pulled into all sorts of arguments. Churchill was pretty good at keeping his focus. I think if he was on Twitter, we'd see him keep a focus on, at least in the early war years, keeping the British people's chin up during the Blitz, which was quite a feat, and then alternately shaming and sweet-talking the United States into entering the war. Those were the two big goals, which he accomplished so well and which would have kept him disciplined on Twitter. You don't want to suffer from schizophrenia if you're going to become a social media user in a constructive way, or twitsophrenia, where you're tweeting and getting involved in all sorts of things. On Instagram, think about Churchill's visual signifiers: the cigars, the hats, the V for victory signs, the cocktails, or the drinks that I don't know if he was so famous for at the time, but we certainly know him for now. Think of how visual those would have been. Instagram, very visual medium. He certainly would have been a compelling figure on Instagram. I would want to know what he was drinking every morning. And then Facebook, a lot of storytelling on Facebook, a lot of sentimentality on Facebook. Now, Churchill was a tough cookie. I don't think he was in real life a sentimentalist. He was quite the marauding imperialist, but he could certainly appeal to people's emotions. He certainly was fond of memories. Facebook always wants you to be involved in your memories in terms of Britain's glories around the world. So I think he would have done great on all of those mediums, except TikTok. He wasn't much of a dancer. And I don't think he would have signed up in the first place because, TikTok is headquartered in China. And Winston Churchill was pretty picky about keeping to the Western world.
And thankfully, we, at this point of our politics, don't have anyone that has actually specialized or succeeded in TikTok dancing as part of their strategy. So let's keep it that way for the sake of our future. Well, Billy, thank you so much for joining us today. And I hope you'll come back if you have anything else to share about communication and politics. We always enjoy the conversation. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Brad. See you again soon.